This
All right. So
conference will
firstly,
now be recorded.
any questions, guys? Anyone, any questions? Anyone, any questions that I can take before I can get started? Any questions out there before I can get started out here? So just to recap a couple of things, this is what we were doing with the storage account. We went ahead and we finally created a storage account yesterday. But before we get started, there are a couple of information that we need to fill. Firstly, the name of the storage account, and I was telling that the name will follow a convention, will follow a pattern. You you have to make sure that the name is more than 3 characters, less than 24 characters, so 3 to 24. Make sure the name is unique and make sure that there are no special characters out here. So even a space is considered to be a special character. So please make sure to avoid the special characters out here. Uh, Second one is the region, and we also said what are the factors that goes into, let's say, deciding a region of a of, let's say, sorry, a storage account out here. Again, as a DevOps engineer, you do not have to know why you should select a region or what is the, let's say, availability of a region and all that stuff. But it's good to know information. It's good to know knowledge so that whenever you tomorrow when you go and shift your career into an architecture and etc., you'll know what are the concepts that you need to follow out here. Three, we said something called as a performance. Again, when I'm talking about performance, there are two performance tiers what Azure really offers you. One is called standard, the other is called premium. When I say standard, it's a HDD hard drive. When I say premium, it's a solid state drive, SSD, what you get out here. So standard and premium. Again, these are a couple of things that you cannot change. You cannot change the name after it's created. You cannot change the location after it's created. Neither you can change the performance tier after the storage account is created. These three will get static. You cannot change them alternatively. And I'll draw a line here, and that's where I'm coming down to. The fourth one, very importantly, redundancy. Again, we have multiple redundancy options available out here, depending upon the region where you create it in. You have LRS, and LRS will give you 3 copies in the same data center synchronously, happening in the same time. Meaning, if I give you the first copy, Microsoft will go and replicate 2 more copies in the same time synchronously, so that if let's say a primary server is down, you still have your data intact in the secondary server or in the tertiary server out here, so that you can go ahead and retrieve your data back. Then you have something called ZRS, zone redundancy services, which will again go ahead and give you 3 different copies but spread over 3 different, let's say, zones of the same, let's say, region. So let's go into the documentation as well. Let's say create, and the best way to reach to the documentation is to create and understand from this itself. So if I just click on this one, it'll just tell me what are all the redundancy options that are available out here. And I have LRS, GRS, and etc. So primary data center 3 copies out here, secondary data center again is 3 copies spread out here in 3 different data centers in the same region. Something called GRS, which will give you geo redundant storage, which will tell you that in the primary data center you have 3 copies out here, and in the secondary data center you'll also have 3 copies, but happening asynchronously. When you create and when you put your data inside, it will take some time depending upon also the size of the data. Asynchronous replication that happens over, let's say, the secondary region. This is the word asynchronous. Synchronous meaning happening at the same time. If you put asynchronous, it's not happening in the same time. It'll take some time for the data to be replicated out here. And then you have something called geo zone redundant storage, wherein in the primary you have a ZRS and the secondary you have something called LRS out here that is happening at the same time. And each and every, let's say, replication tier will have its own SLA what Azure offers. LRS comes up with something called 99.999 to 11 times 9 out here. This is where LRS comes in. And ZRS is around 12 times 9. GRS is the maximum, which is 16 times 9. And if you have to understand it on a very layman terminology, let's go into an article called high availability. You have something called high availability out here, and you have a Wikipedia page for it. And if I just scroll down, maybe later, close. If I just scroll down, this is what it's telling you. If a cloud provider is offering you something called as a 90% availability, the downtime per a year, meaning the unavailability of data is around 2.4 hours, let's say, or let's see per year. It's 36 days where you can have your data not available, meaning an entire month you may not have your storage account being unavailable if the SLA was 90%. But even if you go for a minimum SLA, even if you go for a minimum replication, what Microsoft is offering is 99.999 to 11 times 9, which is more than what this table has to offer. If you have an SLA of 99.99 to 9 times 9, in a given year, you can have your data unavailable for 31.56 milliseconds. Now imagine the same thing if I apply a 99.11 times 9, the SLA is much more better. If I apply a 99.16 times 9, it's very, very, very minute. That's how accurate, let's say, cloud providers are today. So let's go back into the creation of storage account and let's start creating a new storage account today. So I'll just go and create a new resource group called storage RG. I'll say okay. I'll just scroll down and I'll give, let's say, a name to this. Again, I'll say it is dev uber, let's say, east us 2 000, something like this, so that the name is unique. The name is not taken. I avoid special characters and etc. Again, I'll just pick up a location like east us 2. I'll say it is a standard performance tier. I'll start with LRS. I'll start with out here LRS out here. Okay. Mhm. No, again, that will only happen in GRS and RAGRS. You need to have it, meaning if you want to read the data from a secondary endpoint, you will need an RAGRS. In ZRS, if the first server is down, you can get your data by giving a request to Microsoft. You can download all the data back again. But from let's say an application, you cannot access your data. You cannot access your data because it is not a readable copy. It's just an archived copy. It's just a saved copy. You cannot read it. So if you want to read it, you'll need to go for GRS with an option called make, let's say, read access data to be available in case of regional unavailability. This is what you need to go for if you need to make sure that your data is readable, even if the first data center or the primary data center is not available. So I'll just put this in LRS to begin with. I'll say
Yeah, hi
next
Karan.
advanced. Uh, I'll just park the questions. Can I just park the question and
Yeah,
come
no
back
problem.
at the second? Okay, thank you. And here in the advanced tab, there are a couple of options called require REST API transfer and everything, enable public access and etc. I'll just take whatever is the default. I'll just scroll down. There is one thing that we need to understand called access tier, hot and cool. It's telling frequently access data and day-to-day usage scenario, infrequently access data and backup scenarios. So usually you can have two varieties of data. One, someone is accessing very frequently. Let's say, to give you a very simple example, let's say you are creating a storage account for, let's say, an application called ICICI.com. Let's say you have an application called ICICI.com out here. So let's also do that. ICICI.co.in. It is a banking website. Of course, you can substitute with this HDFC, whatever it is, whatever application that you know, you can substitute that here. And here you have something called as a storage account, because for this application to hold data, let's say this is holding inside a storage account out here in our case. This can have two types of data. One is frequently being accessed. Frequently being accessed as in, let's say, day-to-day transactions. Meaning you as a user, you are coming down, you want to see what is the transaction that you're doing for this month. You want to download all that bank statement. When I say download a bank statement, is nothing but a PDF file, nothing but a blob, nothing but sitting inside a storage account out here. So you are, let's say, like you, there are thousands of users who are downloading their monthly bank statement to understand where they have, like, done expenditure and all that stuff for budget planning and all these things out. And there is also one thing which is infrequent access data. Infrequently accessed. When I say infrequently accessed, I'm just talking about the data. Let's say about, there will be very less amount of users who would, let's say, tell that, okay, fine, I want to go 5 years back and see what is the transaction that I did today. Very less, right? Very less frequently used data. So Microsoft is now telling me that, what kind of a storage you want to design. Like, is this storage that is something that you want to hold, let's say, something called as a frequently accessed data, or is it infrequently accessed data? I need to tell Azure whether it is hot or cool. Hot meaning frequently accessed data, cool being infrequently accessed data. You can ask me what difference it makes. It makes a lot of difference in the form of a pricing. In the case of a hot access tier, the cost per a transaction, please listen to what I say. The cost associated per a transaction. What do I mean a cost per a transaction is this. There can be two kind of operations that you can do on a data. Either you can read it or you can write it. Meaning, if I read it, I just download it and I see what the data is. When I say write, I'm also including things like modifying the data, deleting the data, and all these things. So read or write, two things that you can do on a particular data or on a particular blob in Azure. When I read it, there is a cost associated with it. When I write it, there's a cost associated with it. The read and write together is called as a transaction for me. Now I'm telling, if the data is sitting in hot, or if your data is all sitting in hot, the cost per a transaction is less. The cost that is associated per a transaction is actually less, but the cost per storage is more. Cost per GB of storage is more. What do I mean by this is that Microsoft is now telling me that if you have something called as a hot storage account, make sure to have limited data which is being frequently accessed so that you can avoid the cost. How does it boil down at a pricing level? Let's go back again to our website called Azure Pricing Calculator, and let's come back into a pricing calculator today, and let's go down. And I think I already have a service here. I'll delete this out, and now I'll go ahead and add my storage account back again. So I'll say storage account, I'll say view, and let's see this. Again, it's doing in dollars, so I'll just scroll down, make it in Indian National Rupee so that we all be able to understand this out. Just scroll up and let's see. It's telling it is East US 2 or East US. Let's say I'm creating this in East US 2. I'll say East US 2. Then I am creating something like blob storage account. This is something that I'm creating. So I'll say it is blob. Tier is standard. This is where I'm creating this in. General purpose version 2 account. Access tier. Very importantly, it's telling hot in what? LRS. Let's scroll down, and I am calculating for a 1000 GB capacity that I am placing around 1000 GB of data. So the monthly cost that I have is 1427. This is the base price. 1427 is the base price. Plus, it's now telling write operations. It's telling that you will be charged 3 rupees per every 10,000 transactions. For every 10,000 transactions will be meaning, if you read the data 10,000 times, you'll be charged 3 rupees. If you read or if you write the data 10,000 times, you'll be charged 3 rupees out here. And I am saying that there are 10 times I'm doing the 10,000 operations. For every 10,000 operations, it's 3 rupees. And if I do 10 operations like that, I get a cost of what? 38 rupees, something like this. And again, list this containers and all that stuff will come down. This is when the data is in hot. I'm now telling the cost associated per a transaction, either read or write, is 38 rupees per every 10,000 transactions out here, or for 1 lakh transactions, if you can put it in that way. If I change this to cool, do you see the cost has changed? It is almost double the price what Microsoft is charging you for, let's say, those transactions out here. But do you also see this cost is reduced? when you are using hot, the price that is for this particular storage is what? 1427 rupees, 775. It's almost cut down to half. Meaning, when the data is in cool, which is being infrequently accessed, the cost per a transaction is high. Cost per a transaction, meaning if you write, read, and etc., you are being charged 7 rupees instead of 3 rupees out here. So the cost per a transaction, this is high, but the cost per GB of storage is low. This is what you get when you go ahead and, let's say, create it in hot or cool. Now, my question is that, or a company or anyone can ask me that, you know what, I have a mix of data. There is some data which is hot, there is some data which is cool. Can I not create both of them inside a storage account? Yes, you can create both of them inside a storage account, but you don't have the option to go for hot plus cool here. You cannot go for hot plus cool here. We will have to, let's say, uh, tell Microsoft whether it's hot or cool when you're uploading the data. When you're uploading your actual data, we'll also see that. So now I'm telling it is access tier hot or cool. Yes, I'll take a quick pause and I'll take a couple of questions now before I go it. So yes, anyone, any questions? Anyone, any questions, guys? Sorry, can you come again, please? Yes. Again, in on a performance wise, hot and cool, it won't, let's say, give you any different performance out here. The same performance on a performance wise, the same amount of speed, the same amount of retrieval, everything is the same. The major factor which will impact your performance is performance itself, standard or premium. That's the major factor. Hot or cool will just tell Microsoft how should it charge you, because storage account just doesn't charge you on, let's say, the storage basis. It will also charge you for write and read and operations and all these things. So when I say hot or cool, it's no performance impact, it's just the cost impact that you, let's say, see a difference in. So yes, any more questions? Yes.
Yeah. Hello, Kiran. Can you hear me?
Good, please.
Yeah. I mean, regarding LRS, you
Yeah,
said that there are three copies, right?
correct.
In the same data center. So one
Correct.
application is using the data. Let's say like we gave like 100 GB to one application, not a person or
Mm-hmm,
a server, but an application.
mm-hmm,
So let's say like
mm-hmm.
one of the three copies gets destroyed. Is it
Okay.
automatically connected, or you get downtime, or like we have to manually do something?
Again, when you're talking about LRS, LRS
Yes.
is just a data backup. So you will have a downtime. You will have to request Microsoft to give you the second copy
Okay.
or the third copy of the data out
Okay.
there.
So
Yes.
similar kind in GZRS also, right?
Similar kind in
Because we have to.
GZRS, provided your GZRS is not a read copy. So if I scroll down and say GZRS, you can make your secondary copy a read copy out here.
Okay,
So
okay.
you can do a
Yeah.
read copy. So that is an option wherein you can avoid the downtime.
Okay. I mean, there would be no downtime in GZRS.
Correct. In GZRS and in GRS. Because
Okay.
here you see that there is a second copy available, provided if there is a region unavailability. The first region is not
Okay.
available. Secondary can be retrieved and secondary can be read from a
Okay.
different data center altogether.
Okay. One more question. I mean, read
But please.
access only means they can't write. They can only read the data.
Correct. They can't write, they can only read. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Meaning you cannot add new data, but you can still go ahead your
Okay.
applications and it will still give you the old data out here.
Okay. I mean, they can only read the old data. I mean, not
Correct.
very helpful sometimes, but yeah. Okay. I mean, they can
Correct.
have the copy. Yeah.
Correct. And again, these are some things that you kind of invoke when there is a region unavailability. And if there's a region unavailability, it's actually a major event out there. There is a major something, catastrophe happened or some major disaster happened and etc.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
usually, yes.
yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to understand, I mean, what kind of replication or like high
Right.
availability, because all the scenarios, there is a downtime when something is not available.
Correct, correct.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, any more questions here, guys? Just a second. Let's see this. There were some questions of, I mean, in the chat window. Let's see. Can we toggle from hot to cool when we mistakenly did as hot? Yes, good question. You can do it. You can shift your access tier from hot to cool or cool to hot. You can do that. And yes, why hot is less compared to cool? Because hot is frequently used. I was expecting the price higher to be in cool. Hot is frequently used, but the meaning the cost per transaction is less, but the cost per usage is more, meaning per GB is more, storage is more. Cool is mostly to, let's say, backup all your data. When you say cool, you're just doing a backup of your data out here. You're just using a storage account to back up your services. So if I select hot, leave later frequently, okay. Let's say, okay, if I select hot later, if I use frequently, is it changed to cool? No, it's not changed to cool. Again, later if I use frequently, if you use frequently you have to go to hot. Using frequently you'll have to go to hot. If you're not using frequently you'll have to go to cool. Please go slowly, I cannot go more slow than this. Again, I'm doing a very, let's say, very slow track out here. After creating a storage account we can change it to hot to cool. Yes, you can change it to hot to cool, cool to hot. You can do that. You can also do that as such. Yes, any more questions that I can take till here? So storage account, sorry, can you come again please? When you say 10,000 below, what do you mean 10,000 below here? Per a transaction. So if I say one, you still have a charge. So again, when you create something, when you create a storage account, you will do some read or write operations. Again, if you don't do anything, you just create it, keep it idle, there isn't any charge. Again, if I say idle, there is no data at all, right? There is 0 GB capacity. You're not utilizing it, you're just putting it there. So there will be no charge out there. Or there will be a very less charge because you created it and so on and so forth. A very less charge as such. Yes, any more questions here?
Yes,
Sir,
can
Karan sir.
hi, I mean, if you are selecting LRS for the first time in
Okay.
future, if you want a ZRS
Mm-hmm.
or something else, so is it
Mm-hmm.
possible to change?
Yes, definitely. It is possible to change. We will also see how to change it. Once I create it, we'll also see how to change it and what is available to change. What are the tiers that are available to change and etc.
Okay, sure.
Alright, I'll just take a quick pause. I'll park a couple of questions. We'll move forward. So till here, I said access tier and etc. Next, there is something called networking. And I'm not covering networking right now. I need a separate section for networking. I'll have to do and then we'll come back again. And then there is something called data protection. And there is something called enable soft delete for blobs, 7 days and so on and so forth. What this means is that if your data is deleted, till how many days you can retrieve it back. It just acts like a recycle bin. Again, you can do a 365 days also out here. You can do 365, you can do 720 and etc. I'll go with the default option called, let's say, 7 days out here. I'll say next encryption. We'll talk about what encryption really means out here. And I'll say review and create. So what I did is that I am just changing the options that are in the basic and in the advanced tiers. These are mostly something that we'll be using, basic or advanced. These are something that we'll be using. And now Microsoft is running something called validation. You should see this called validation passed. If you do not enter a proper option, let's say you do not give a proper name and etc., the validation will fail. So just make sure that the validation passes and then say create this out. Now Microsoft is taking your request for creation. It's going in the background. It's allocating you an actual physical server and creating something called as a storage account for you in the background. So now this storage account is a service that is giving you some space on an actual data center that is running in a location called East US2. So you might have a lot of servers out here, but I'm just saying there is one server on which there is some space allocated out here. And this server is running out of a data center called East US2 out here. So Microsoft is now giving you some space here to go ahead and let's say create this out. or any region that you create, Microsoft is just giving you some space so that you can create it out. Again, you'll have to wait for a minute or two, and Microsoft is now telling that, okay, fine, the deployment is successful. Let's go inside this. So now this is what happens. So let's come back from the very first screen. I have a tenant. This is my tenant. I have a subscription inside my tenant. Inside my subscription, I have a proper role called owner. So I was able to create things out. Inside the subscription, I can have multiple resource groups. So as of now, I have all these three resource groups. And inside the resource group, I have a storage account service. Again, when we looked in the last session, we said you can also do what? Something called identity and access management on the resource group or on the subscription. Now I am telling, if you go inside a storage account, you can also do the identity and access management on the storage account level as well. You can also directly assign a permission onto the storage account. Why is it useful? Let's say you are a very small organization, you only have one resource group. You have three people, a developer, a QA, and let's say a DevOps engineer. Developer has a storage account called dev. QA has a storage account called QA. DevOps has a storage account called DevOps. You can now go ahead, assign assign individual people to individual storage accounts so that they can only, let's say, play around with the data of the storage account they are allocated to. You can also do such a kind of access level as well. So you can also go one more granularity and also do a storage account as and also do, let's say, a storage account level as well. And when I say storage account level, you don't have to really give a contributor. You can say add role, add a role assignment, and you can search for a role which is specific to a storage account as such. Storage account contributor, storage account backup contributor. If you need to understand what it does, this is what it does. Lets you perform a backup and restore operations using this one. Lets you manage storage account, including accessing keys and all these things and etc. Depending upon what you want to give it to someone, you can isolate your roles. Again, for just a storage, you have so many things out here. You can isolate a role, not give someone a complete access, give someone the least privilege so that they can go ahead and perform what they want to only with that particular storage account as such. And coming back to the storage service, on the OU page, you have information like what is the resource group this is created in, what is the region this is created in, what is the subscription this is created in, what kind of a performance tier you have. Is it standard? Is it premium? What it is? And then you have the replication model called LRS, locally redundant storage.